Welcome to Scariest Moments, the series that showcases the most horrifying moments in horror movies. My name is Tyler Style, and today we'll be looking at The Conjuring 2. Like the original Conjuring, this movie was directed by James Wan. Wan was offered a life-changing amount of money to direct The Fate of the Furious, but declined in order to direct this movie. He posted on his Instagram that he felt rejuvenated to tell a scary story just one more time. The first Conjuring is one of the scariest movies of the modern age, and Warner Brothers tried to make it PG-13. This movie, on the other hand, had the intention of being an R-rated film. This sequel is a great addition to the Conjuring universe. It's known for its misdirection with jump scares and its tense feeling throughout its over 2-hour runtime. But how scary is it? Let's find out. This movie begins with the Warrens at the Amityville house, and they are about to watch Lorraine go into one of her visions. While setting everything up, we see Drew is back as the tech guy for this case. Lorraine goes into the past spiritually to see if Ronald DeFeo killed his family because he was angry or under some demonic presence. In this scene, Lorraine is portraying Ronald, and we watch her shoot the family with an invisible shotgun. While doing so, Lorraine hears whispers saying to kill them. As we walk by a mirror, we get a cool shot of Lorraine and Ronald moving simultaneously. After killing the two brothers and sister, we see a creepy boy with no eyes watch her and go down the stairs. She follows the boy into the basement and finds a total of 4 kids. They look at a sheet covering something, and Lorraine sees that it's a mirror. She watches something walk behind her in the mirror, and when she turns back, we see the now iconic nun in the mirror right behind her. She looks behind her again, and when she looks back at the mirror, the nun is right in front of her. Behind them, she sees Ed, who snaps his neck back, and we hear a crunch-like noise. This makes Lorraine scream and go back to reality. Even though this was at the Amityville vision, this actually has nothing to do with it. Lorraine is having a psychic premonition about what's happening in Enfield, even though she doesn't know it yet. The nun is played by Bonnie Aarons, who plays the same role in the spin-off movie The Nun, even though it wasn't as good as this movie. We go to Enfield, a northern part of London where we see 2 little girls talking and smoking cigarettes. The one smoking is named Camilla, and the other girl is named Janet. They made a Ouija board, and Camilla is talking about learning a new language or something.
I think I'll let Keith French kiss me. What?
A teacher finds Janet and Camilla and takes the cigarette away and smokes it herself. We meet the rest of the Hodgson kids, Margaret, Billy, and Johnny, and we already met Janet on the staircase. They are the 4 children being raised by their single mom, Peggy. Billy has a really bad stutter and is picked on at school because of it. The kids arrive home from school, and we learn the Hodgsons are very poor and can't even afford biscuits.
No, Billy, I didn't get any bloody biscuits because we don't have any bloody money!
It's nighttime and Janet is sleeping in her bed. She hears a noise and wakes up on the living room floor. Margaret hears loud banging on her door and sees Janet isn't in her bed. She opens the door and walks into the hall where she watches Janet walk into the room, but she wasn't the one knocking on the door. The next day, Billy and Janet are playing with a spinning light-up toy that plays a song about the Crooked Man.
He was a crooked man and he walked a crooked man. He found a crooked 6. He bought a crooked cat, which caught a crooked mouse, and they all lived together in a little crooked house.
After Billy doesn't listen to his mom about not eating too many biscuits, he gets out of bed late at night to get some water. Janet is talking in her sleep and Margaret is telling her to wake up. After she doesn't, Margaret closes her eyes to hear someone yelling at Janet through her own voice. They get into an argument, and Margaret gets up to wake up Janet one more time. When getting Janet to lie in bed, she tries to go back to bed but gets Janet yelling at her to stay away from Billy. Margaret yells at Janet just to hear someone whisper behind her. She turns around and we see someone in the corner, but when she turns the light on, it's only a poster. We go back to Billy, who's walking back upstairs, and there's a boomer in the living room, but he doesn't notice. He walks upstairs that steps on a fire truck that makes a siren sound. He kicks it into a tent in the hallway, and when going to bed, he hears the fire truck again. It rolls into his room with the siren turned on. Johnny must be a heavy sleeper because he's not waking up to this loud-ass fire truck. Billy turns the fire truck off and rolls the fire truck back inside the tent. The fire truck rolls back out and he hears someone scream from within the tent. Billy wakes up his mom and tells her someone is in the tent. She looks in the tent and sees nothing, telling him it was only a bad dream. She hears creaking downstairs and tells him to go to his room. Peggy goes downstairs to see Janet in the rocking chair sleeping. The next morning, Janet is watching TV and is switching through channels. She finds a channel she likes and starts watching. The TV starts changing channels on its own and the remote is nowhere to be found. The home phone rings and Janet answers it. While on the phone, she sees the remote in the rocking chair. She grabs the remote and switches the channel back to her program. After a lightning strike, the TV turns to static and she starts beating the shit out of it. This causes the TV to turn off and she sees the old man in the rocking chair in the reflection. When she turns around, the old man screams "My house" from behind the TV. She screams as the TV turns back on. We get back to the Warrens and Lorraine wakes up to Ed painting. She sees the picture he is painting and it's of the nun she saw at the beginning of the film. They sit down to talk and Lorraine tells Ed that she doesn't want to do any more cases for the time being. In the background is the word Valak. Valak is the name of the demon portraying the nun. We get to see its name a few times in the Warrens' house. During the same conversation, we see its name again for a split second by the window behind Ed. It's another night at the Hodgsons and Janet tied herself to her bed so she doesn't go sleepwalking anymore. She gets her ass dropped and hears banging on her bedroom door. She unties herself and goes in the hall. The lights aren't working, so she takes a flashlight and checks downstairs, where she sees the rocking chair rocking aggressively. She goes back into her bed where she hears the door open and she turns around to a chair at her bedside. She hears someone walking through the hall and hides under her covers. We get the POV of the old man as he looks over her. The covers fly off of her and she screams, waking up Margaret. Both of their beds start to shake and they run to their mom's room, where Janet shows her mom that the old man bit her. Hey, old man Jenkins, she's a minor, you can't be doing none of that kinky shit. Peggy finds the Ouija board and starts screaming at her daughters. The dresser gets dragged across the room and scares everyone. They sprint to the neighbors across the street. These neighbors are Peggy and Vic Nottingham, who taught their dog a pretty cool trick.
He went down the basement, there's no one there.
What's he doing?
Oh, we've taught him to ring the bell when he wants to go.
Vic calls the police and they all go into the house. Everyone hears footsteps upstairs and an officer grabs a chair and knocks on the wall. They hear the steps again and the chair drags all the way back to the kitchen table. The police officers are too scared and run out of the house, saying there's nothing they can do. Judy is making charm bracelets where you can see the name Valak on one of the bracelets. Behind her we see a dark figure move. Lorraine looks up hearing something and notices Judy is gone. On the bookshelf we see the word Valak one last time. Lorraine sees Judy in the hallway staring at the nun. The nun walks into a doorway and Lorraine follows her. Lorraine walks into the room and doesn't see anything. Across the room, a recording device starts playing some opera, and Lorraine walks over to turn it off. The light turns off and she stares at the painting while trying to turn the light back on. This time, the eyes look a little different on the painting. As she tries to leave, the door slams shut and she sees another painting start to shake. Behind the painting is the shadow of the nun that walks along the wall until it is directly behind the painting, which makes for a pretty cool visual effect. We see fingers come out from behind the painting and the nun comes out of the wall to attack Lorraine. She falls down into an unknown room and sees the nun smiling. When asking who she is, Judy sees her mom freaking out on the couch and Lorraine asks the nun what it wants. It points to Ed, who takes a huge spike through the back. Lorraine wakes up and we get back to the Hodgsons. Peggy gets convinced by a reporter to do a story on what is going on in order to get some recognition and help. While interviewing Janet and Margaret, the reporter starts calling out to whatever paranormal entity is there, and Janet starts acting weird. She makes growling noises and the lights start to flicker. The old man, who we now know as Bill Wilkins, starts talking to the reporters through Janet and tells them to get out of his house.
This is my home. Get out now.
He died in the house in the rocking chair after he got a hemorrhage in his brain. He calls Peggy a cow, and Janet comes back to her normal self. The Hodgsons are staying at the Nottinghams for the night. Back at the empty Hodgsons house, the Crooked Man light-up toy starts playing on its own. The Hodgsons are sleeping in the living room, and Billy hears the dog bell ringing. He goes to let Baron out, but he isn't there. He hears the other bell ring and goes to the back door and sees Baron. He goes to let him out, and it turns out it's not Baron. It's the Crooked Man who is disguising himself. The Crooked Man is played by Javier Botet. Javier Botet is one of my favorite horror-specific actors. He was born with Marfan syndrome, which can make someone be tall with elongated limbs, fingers, and toes. Because of this, he is 6'7", 120 pounds, and double-jointed. He has played monsters for basically his whole career, and some of the most recognized would be the Hobo in It, the Big Toe Corpse in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and he was also in Mama, just to name a small percentage of the films he's been in. He also plays Slenderman, but I refuse to talk about that awful film. The Crooked Man trips Billy and starts telling his story that we heard in the song earlier.
Was the Crooked Man. And he walks a crooked mile.
Billy wakes up his family and the Nottinghams come downstairs where the Crooked Man keeps talking and we can hear it getting closer to them. It turns out just to be Janet talking in the Crooked Man's voice. The steel plate on the fireplace flies across the room and Janet drops to the floor. Peggy yells to get an ambulance and we transition to the Warrens, who are listening to a voice recording of the interview that Margaret and Janet did. Father Gordon is asking the Warrens to fly to London to see if it's a hoax or not. After discussing, the Warrens decide to go to London and visit the house. Peggy shows Ed a locked door. This was the girl's bedroom with items destroyed and crosses all over the walls. Lorraine is outside talking to Janet. Janet talks about how she doesn't have any friends anymore because of what's happening to her. Janet also says she constantly hears the voice behind her, and it said it wants to hurt Lorraine. Ed learns that all the furniture was bought with the house, and the rocking chair had the most paranormal activity. Ed and Lorraine make Janet fill her mouth with water to make sure she isn't doing any sort of ventriloquism when Bill's voice is talking. Janet says Bill won't talk with them looking at her, so they are forced to turn their backs to hear him speak. After they turn their backs, he speaks up and the lights turn off.
I'm not a heaven man.
Ed shows Bill his cross and Bill starts to scream, and Janet is back to normal. Lorraine says she doesn't sense any type of presence, and it's making her skeptical. Janet ties herself up when going to bed, and her mom doesn't like that she does that. In the middle of the night, someone is whistling the folk song "This Old Man." Janet wakes up pinned to the roof of the living room and watches Bill Wilkins rock in his rocking chair. He stands up and walks upstairs. Janet gets pulled through the wall into the room that is chained up with all the crosses. The crosses start to turn upside down, and when they stop, Bill attacks her from the corner of the room. When screaming for help, Peggy wakes up and sees Janet from a crack in the door. While Janet sees her mom, a hand grabs her face and Peggy sees Bill Wilkins. Janet is getting choked by the curtains, and the Warrens and Peggy finally unlock the door and save Janet. Lorraine noticed a cross shaking a little, and all the crosses were back right side up. The Warrens are still skeptical because they haven't seen any concrete evidence, because they weren't looking at Janet when she was talking in Bill's voice, and for all they know, Janet could have gotten the key and put herself in the room and had someone put the key back. Anita Gregory says that she thinks that it's just a scheme so the Hodgsons can get better housing from the government. The Warrens give the Hodgsons the benefit of the doubt and say that they will stay and try to help. Ed is fixing up the house, and after he fixes the sink, he offers to fix the washer and dryer, but the basement is flooded due to a leak. He sees the pipe that is flooding the place and goes to fix it. While fixing it, Mr. Billy Wilkins is right behind him. When Peggy calls out that something's behind him, he turns around to nothing. Peggy, on the other hand, sees Billy's face in the water and gets pulled down. She escapes, but with a bite mark. They notice something fall in the water, and it's a pair of dentures, with only 2 teeth marks that match the bite mark. It's Christmas time, and while decorating, Janet hears knives sharpening in the kitchen. She calls over her siblings, and she can see something no one else can. Everyone is scared, but Johnny goes into the kitchen to stick up for his sister.
Remember what Mr. Warren said? We can't let bully us. This is our house.
Johnny finds knives stuck in the kitchen table and Margaret screams. He goes to see what's wrong and she said Janet disappeared from in front of her. He hears a knife slice in the kitchen and turns to see Janet next to him with one of the knives. Peggy and Ed get out of the basement when hearing the screaming and run into the house, just to see a chair fly past their faces. The kitchen door slams shut and they hear everything being thrown around or breaking. Ed rips the door open to find the kitchen destroyed and Janet nowhere to be found. Harry Whitmark is the new Drew and deals with the technology for this case. He hears growling in the walls and everyone rushes over to him. Ed opens up some cabinet doors to see Janet in a very cramped position that she couldn't have gone to herself and yelling in Wilkins' voice. Ed takes his cross out to get Bill to stop possessing Janet, and they successfully get her out. Anita comes to the door and says she has proof that the girls are faking it. She was secretly recording outside and watched as Janet threw everything herself. Peggy kicks everyone out because Ed says that the church won't do anything after seeing the video. The Warrens leave and Janet tells her siblings that the demon said it would kill them if she didn't make the Warrens and crew leave. While the Warrens are on the train, Ed drops the records and the tapes make an X shape. This makes Ed suspicious and he notices that Bill gave him 2 messages that when played at the same time say they won't let him go.
Help me! It won't let me go! Help me! It won't let me go!
Lorraine goes into a trance and gets a vision from the past. It shows Bill using an oxygen tank and he says that he can't go because it wants her. He doesn't refer to what it is though. As Bill is talking, the nun grabs him from behind and Lorraine wakes up. She realizes that the old man's spirit is just a pawn in Valak's game and they decide to go back. Peggy is in the kitchen where she hears Margaret screaming. She runs into the living room to see Margaret levitating and Janet right behind her levitating and laughing evilly. Margaret gets thrown across the room and Janet isn't looking too good. Peggy tells everyone to go to the Nottinghams and tries to run back into the house to get Janet as the door shuts. The Warrens are driving back and explain that Valak is the reason why she couldn't sense any spirits. During the previous vision of Bill that Lorraine saw, he gave her a riddle.
Something like, I am given and I am taken. I was there at your first breath. You didn't ask for me. But I will follow you until your death.
They solve it and learn that they have the power over the demon if they know its name. This whole video I've been saying Valak's name, but up to this point in the movie nobody knows its name yet. The Warrens arrive at the house and the door is locked. Ed breaks a window and tries to climb in, but a couch smacks him in the face and doesn't let him enter. Ed goes into the basement to try to find an entrance into the house. Lorraine follows him and the basement door shuts, separating them. After a heartfelt talk, Ed decides to go alone even though Lorraine doesn't want him to. He breaks through the door and climbs into the house. The demon twists a knob making steam hit Ed right in the face. We go back outside and see that Vic finds an axe and attempts to break the basement door down. We go back to Ed, who has very blurry vision and his hearing is impaired after getting hit with the steam. He hears the same opera that Lorraine heard earlier and he walks towards it. We see the nun's hand wrap around the wall right next to Ed. He hears Janet cry for help and hears some heavy breathing and growling near him. He pulls out his cross trying to stop whatever is near him. Lorraine is trying to figure out the demon's name and remembers that she wrote it down in her Bible when she was in her trance at home with the nun.
V-A-L-A-K. Valak.
As she tries to run in the house, a lightning bolt strikes the tree in front. The tree falls but leaves a sharp edge just like the one we saw Ed getting impaled by in her vision. Ed is going upstairs, barely being able to see, and the Crooked Man song starts to play in the tent. He gets close to the toy and it stops singing the song right before it should. He looks up to see the Crooked Man right in front of him. He jumps back and the Crooked Man gets up and flies into the wall. The wall starts cracking and he comes out of another wall behind Ed. Ed closes the door to the room the Crooked Man is in as he almost gets killed by him. Lorraine gets into the basement and starts to walk through it. When climbing up, Ed finds Janet upstairs in the room with all the crosses. She is looking outside and the window she is looking out of shatters. She climbs up the window and jumps, but Ed runs over and grabs her before she can fall into the broken tree trunk. Ed is holding both him and her up by a curtain that is ripping slowly off the curtain rod. Lorraine comes into the room and sees the nun in the corner. It screams, pinning her to the wall. She screams Valak's name and Valak starts shape-shifting and finally disintegrated. While the nun is shape-shifting, we see it turn into a demon. This demon is Joseph Bashara, the composer of the movie who also composed The Conjuring 1 and played Bathsheba. Lorraine saves Ed and Janet as the curtain gives out and she pulls them back up. Janet and her mom cry in the room and it fades to the morning. Ed is sitting on an ambulance and Peggy and Janet walk over and thank the Warrens. We get some text that says that Peggy lived the rest of her life in that house, and in 2013 she died in the rocking chair that Bill Wilkins died in 40 years earlier. We are back at the Warrens' Demonology Witchcraft room. Ed moves the music box from the first Conjuring in order to put the Crooked Man's singing light up toy next to it, and the movie ends with Ed and Lorraine dancing to Elvis's Can't Help Falling in Love. The Conjuring 2 has a runtime of 2 hours and 14 minutes and a total of 22 jump scares. Unlike The Conjuring, it was actually hard for me to decide my favorite part of this movie, but I've decided to give it to the Nun's shadow scene. Personally, the Nun creeps me out so much, and the spin-off movie The Nun was a total letdown. If you haven't seen The Conjuring 2 yet, go see it. This series only focuses on the scariest moments, and you actually miss a lot by only watching the video. My name is Tyler Style, and this has been Scariest Moments. Thanks for watching The Conjuring 2 Scariest Moments. Put in the comments what your favorite part of The Conjuring 2 movie was. Support me on Patreon if you guys want to see me do this for a living and give you guys a whole lot more content. If you want to suggest a movie yourself, go into the official Beware the Scared Discord and go into video ideas. Like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you guys have an amazing day, and I'll catch you guys later.